Joining us, I'm Phyllis Smith. New tonight, a bill that would ban camping on most public land across West Virginia took one step closer to becoming law today. This afternoon, the West Virginia House of Delegates passed House Bill 5319 with a vote of 62 to 32, with 5 House members absent or not voting. The bill aims to prohibit camping or the storing of personal property on any street, park, trail, or any other public property outside of specifically designated campgrounds or trailer parks. If the bill becomes law, anyone who violates the statute would be given a warning and provided information about resources available to help them in seeking shelter. Anyone who further violates the statute with additional offenses would be guilty of a misdemeanor, punishable by fines and jail time. The bill elicited over 30 minutes of debate on the House floor, with some delegates arguing the issue should be left up to local governments or that the bill would effectively criminalize homelessness. Other delegates argued prohibiting public camping is necessary for protecting public health and safety. The bill will now be considered by the state Senate.